All right, we're going to look at our last type of graph. Our last type of graph is called a relative frequency table. And you really already know how to do it. Relative frequency is just a decimal or a percent. So we've already done fraction decimals and percents for the majority of the year. Basically, we're just taking a table and we're going to change our values into a decimal or percent and put it on a graph. So what we've got over here up in the top left, it says a class of freshman students at Lincoln High School choose their preferred university to attend after graduation. The results of the survey are shown below. So we've got each university in the left-hand column, and then on the right-hand column we have how many students chose that university. What we're going to do is down here at the bottom, we have what's called a relative frequency table. We're going to change those values into, this one's asking us for a decimal, so we're going to change them to decimals on here. Well, frequency is the easiest to do. We're just going to go down the list, and we can see University of Texas was picked 4 times, so I'm just going to put a little 4 right there. Texas A&M was picked 6 times, so I'm going to put a 6 there. Baylor 4, Texas Tech 3, Texas State 1, and Rice down here at the bottom is 2. So those are all our frequencies. Relative frequency, this is asking us for a decimal. So the first thing we're going to have to do is get the total, because in order to get a decimal, we need a fraction first. If I add up 4 and 6, I get 10. 4 and 3 make 7, and 1 and 2 makes 3. And if we add up 10 plus 7 makes 17, 17 plus 3 makes 20. So our total number of votes in the entire table was 20. So we're going to change each one of these into a decimal. So let's start with University of Texas. 4 out of 20 students in the class picked them. So in order to get that to a decimal, we're going to do the same thing we've done all year long. We're going to divide. I added a decimal and a 0. This one's an easy one. 20 goes into 40 twice. So we're already done. So University of Texas, their relative frequency was 2 hundredths, or 2 tenths, sorry. 2 tenths, or 20%. Do the same thing over here, but now we're going to do it for Texas A&M. They had 6 out of 20. I'm going to do the exact same thing. 6 divided by 20. 20 goes into 60 3 times. So 3 tenths or 30% pick Texas A&M. Baylor was 4 twentieths again, so we don't have to do that one anymore. We've already done 4 twentieths as a decimal, which is 0.2. Texas Tech was 3 out of 20. So I'm going to divide 3 by 20. Got to add a decimal and a 0. 20 goes into 30 one time. When I subtract, I get 10. So I'm going to bring down another 0. And 20 goes into 100 5 times. So Texas Tech had 15 hundredths or 15%. Texas State, had 1 out of 20. So if we're going to divide, 20 goes into 10 0 times. So I'm going to add another 0, and 20 goes into 100 5 times. So Texas State was just 5 hundredths, which is obviously the smallest one so far. And then Rice, which is our last one, is 2 twentieths. This one's a little bit easier because if you look at it, you can also tell that 2 twentieths is the same thing as 1 tenth. So our decimal for Rice is just 0.1 or 1 tenth. So there's our relative frequency table. Up here on the right, it says write a true or false for each statement. from our relative frequency table. So we're going to take what we just did and determine if these statements are true or false. The first one says 50% of the students chose either Baylor or Texas A&M. Well, if we add them up, Baylor was 3/10 and Texas A&M was, Texas A&M was 3/10 and Baylor was 2/10. So if we add those up, we get 5/10, which, if we move our decimal, is 50%. So that one is true. The second one says 1/4 of the students chose to attend the University of Texas. Well, University of Texas, remember, had 4 people out of 20. So let's simplify that and see if we end up with 1/4. We know we can divide both the numerator and denominator by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 20 divided by 4 is 5. So that one would be false. 1/5 of the students chose University of Texas, not 1/4. Okay, the third one says fewer than 80% of the students do not choose to attend Texas Tech. Well, we knew 15% chose Texas Tech, so let's do 100 minus 15 to see how many did not. If I subtract that, I get 85%. So 85% of the students did not choose Texas Tech, which would make that statement also false, because that says fewer than 80% of students do not choose Texas Tech, but we can see right here that greater than 85% or more than 80%. All right, our last one says the 3 universities that were chosen by the fewest number of students make up 3/10 of the results. Well, the 3 fewest were our bottom 3 on our table: Texas Tech, Texas State, and Rice. So if we add all those decimals up, I have 1500s, 500s, and 100s. So if I add all those up, 5 plus 5 is 10. I get 3, which is 30%, or 3/10. Remember, I can add 1 0 underneath there because it has one number after the decimal. So that last one would be true. 3/10 or 30% chose the fewest 3. All right, so down here at the bottom, we've got what you're going to see most often. This is called a percent bar graph. The most important thing to notice is that these percents have to line up and equal 100% at the end. If they don't, we made a mistake somewhere. These are pretty easy to make. I'm going to use the same color as I did in my relative frequency table. We knew Texas Tech was 2/10 or with 20%. So I'm just going to start my graph, and I'm going to go up to 20% and shade it. Texas A&M was 3/10 or 30%. So from where I ended, I'm going to go up 30%. I'm going to shade it in. Baylor was 2/10. So from where I just ended, I'm going to go up 20%. Texas Tech was 15. So I'm going from 70 to 85. Texas State was only 5%. So I'm only going to go from 85 to 90. And then Rice was our last 10%. So I'm just going to shade in all the way up to 100, which works perfectly. All right, that's a percent bar graph and a relative frequency table. Just remember that all you're doing is taking a fraction and changing it to a decimal or a percent.